Now, yesterday, speaking of law enforcement, FBI agents raided the home and office of Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton. After returning to the White House, Trump pulled his security clearance and protective detail despite threats to Iran on Bolton's life. The FBI agents were also seen in his Washington office carrying boxes of documents, likely searching for potentially classified information. Bolton has been critical of Trump during his second term on TV, as well as in the Atlantic magazine, days before Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska. And the next day after the Atlantic piece published, Trump posted, quote, "Very unfair media is at work on my meeting with Putin, constantly quoting fired losers and really dumb people like John Bolton, who just said that even though the meeting is on American soil, quote, Putin has already won. What's that all about? We are winning on everything." And yesterday, the president was very critical of John Bolton. Bolton, of course, wrote a book very critical of the presidency of Donald Trump in his first term.
I'm not a fan of John Bolton. I thought he was a sleazebag, actually. And he suffers major Trump derangement syndrome, but so do a lot of people.
And as the raid was going on, Trump's FBI director, Kash Patel, posted on X, "No one is above the law," said FBI agents are on mission. Rich?
Lucas Tomlinson live for us at the White House. Lucas, thank you. For more on the FBI's raid on John Bolton's home and office, let's bring in former federal prosecutor Katie Cherkasky. Katie, thanks for joining us this afternoon. So, from what you've seen so far, is this about classified documents? What do you think this is all about?
Well, this is the most significant move that the DOJ has made against a self-proclaimed critic of Donald Trump and this administration. So certainly there's going to be, I think, some sort of paranoia maybe that this is just a retaliatory attack that's not based in the law, but we have no evidence of that. In fact, to the contrary, there's been 2 judges who have signed off on search warrants, which do require affidavits from federal agents and probable cause in order to get that. So we have to presume that these folks have evidence to support this move because a law was violated, not because tangentially John Bolton is not a fan of Donald Trump, openly so.
And how long would it take, do you think, for us to see that evidence? I mean, eventually, if this ends in charges, we're going to have to hear about it, no?
Well, that's right. And, you know, the FBI, many times when they raid someone's house, they arrest them same day. They didn't arrest John Bolton. I think that they are taking steps that are proper from what it looks like to look into something that seems to be ongoing. And it is, in fact, a federal violation of criminal law to retain classified documents or even remove them from secured areas if you do have a security clearance and access to that. So that is a crime. It is something that can be looked into. Whether they move forward with charges, I don't believe that decision obviously has been made yet, but that will be what tells us the reality of this, irrespective of the fact that John Bolton is a huge critic of Donald Trump. He may also have violated the law, but only time will tell for sure what this is about.
Now, Donald Trump was president the first time around when John Bolton conceivably last had access to classified information. Is there anything in the statute that says if it's a little older, it's less serious? Or, I mean, are they looking back at the time where he did have active ongoing access to classified intelligence?
Well, it really depends on what they're saying happened. If he retained classified information, then it is an ongoing crime. And so the crime begins when you remove the material. And if you continue to retain it, then you are, in fact, still in violation of that statute. Again, even with President Biden, it was determined that he had, in fact, violated technically the elements of that statute by retaining information outside of the authority he had. But of course, no prosecution was brought. So certainly it depends on the facts here, but very much ongoing issues.
Yeah, and you heard in Lucas's report there, this was a lot of after the back and forth between President Trump and John Bolton when it came to the meeting in Russia, meeting with the Russian president in Alaska. Here's what Senator Chris Coons had to say about all this timing.
In recent days after the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska, Bolton has been publicly criticizing President Trump, saying that Putin is playing him and that he doesn't understand the risks of what he's doing in engaging with Putin, and Trump has been firing back. So the timing of this search of Bolton's home is particularly chilling.
Now, the president said he had no knowledge that this was going to go down the way that it went down. Do you think that the FBI was even really aware of that criticism before they decided to go in yesterday?
Again, all of these individuals are making oaths under penalty of perjury that they have evidence to support that a crime may have been committed, and that evidence would be found in the places that were searched. So I will defer to their integrity at this point. And many things can be true at the same time. Of course, Donald Trump does not like John Bolton, and the feeling is mutual, but that does not mean that there couldn't also be a crime that was committed. And so I will say that they're parallel for sure, and people can question the timing and the suspicious nature of that in their mind, but ultimately the proof will be in the pudding one way or the other.
Yeah, looking now to New York, where an appeals court has thrown out that $500 million judgment against President Trump. What does that all mean, and why did they decide to do that?
Well, obviously, that was a huge victory for President Trump, a couple of days ago here. And essentially, the court in New York said that this fine was a violation of the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits both cruel and unusual punishment and excessive fines. And so the court unanimously, in terms of the fine, decided that that was a violation. Now, in terms of the actual underlying criminal statute, that there was some sort of fraud on the books here, this is something that the state of New York would be wise to never deal with ever again. One of the points that was being made by President Trump is that these transactions that Letitia James brought against him as criminal violations were business transactions between private parties, both of whom were happy with what was going on here. And the way that this has been brought against President Trump and the Trump organization has chilled the prospect of doing business in New York for many people across the country. If that is going to be on the table, that they could be criminally prosecuted for something where the parties to the transactions have made no complaint whatsoever. So big picture, the case on the actual allegations will move forward in the appeals, but the fine was overturned unanimously, as well it should have been.
Yeah, $500 million, an awful lot of money. Katie Cherkasky, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.